Welcome once again to Let's Talk Marriage. This is Pastor Larry coming to you this Wednesday afternoon with Let's Talk Marriage. All right. Hope everyone is doing well. If you woke up this morning, you are doing well. All right, we're going to get right on into our subject matter for today. Our subject matter for today is ways to improve communication in a marriage. We've talked about communication on several occasions during these programs, but today we're going to focus on some ways to improve communication, and we all are guilty of it. Nobody really communicates as well as they should. And communication just doesn't mean having a conversation. It means listening, and that's a major part of communication. One of the steps on here for communication would be model respectful listening. Don't wait for your spouse to make first move. A lot of times we do that. We want to say something, we don't know how to get it out. We sit around and throw out hints. You ever did that? You throw out hints about what you want to address, what you're doing your communication, instead of just coming out and saying it. But there's a way that you say it. You don't want to come out and just say it any kind of way, or trying to communicate. The wrong time to try to communicate is when you're in an argument or something, or if you're in a disagreement. That's not the time to try to communicate. The time to communicate is when everything is going smooth, or you're at a moment where there's nothing going on right at that moment. You want to communicate something. You want to get your point across for something that's something either that's been bothering you, or just something you just want to discuss with your spouse. Choose to be genuinely interested in what your spouse has to say. In other words, when she comes to you, or when you come to your wife, you should listen to them when they do. Make sure that you are actually concerned about or interested in what they're saying. Because sometimes when people are talking, if you don't want to hear what they're saying, or if you don't want to listen to what they're saying, you kind of tune them out, and then you come back and say, "What you say?" You're not listening again. In order to listen, you have to give them your undivided attention, and that's always a problem, especially when it's something that you don't want to address, or it's a touchy subject. Sometimes, like, if you want to, you have a complaint about your in-laws, about stuff like that, or things that she might be doing or he might be doing in the household that you don't necessarily agree, and you want to, like, for instance, if he's leaving his dirty clothes around, or come in and don't hang up his clothes or something like that, you want to discuss it. You want to bring it up you want to communicate to him or her about it without starting a disagreement. You want to make it a mutual conversation where you listen. So choose to be genuinely interested in what your spouse has to say. Schedule regular. This is a hard one, especially in this day and age. Schedule regular media-free family meal times. A lot of times when you, especially when you go to a restaurant, you see everybody sitting at the table, and everybody's looking at their device. And usually, sometimes that happens in a home as well. You might get a call or something while you're having dinner, but when you're having dinner, a family dinner, you should always have a family dinner. If we've gotten away from it, with the things that are going on, the fast-paced environment that's around, we tend to get away from having family meals. But during the family meals, that's when you get to discuss things, you get to listen things, you get to know your children, you get to know your spouse, how their day was, and seem generally interested in it. We talked about that earlier. You seem generally interested in what they're saying during that time, and try to have those dinners where There's no social media involved. Some families, they have everybody put their phones or turn their phones off at dinner time so they can sit down at that moment and have a general family dinner or actual family dinner where you're communicating with each other. And here's another one here. This is a really good one. I have to make sure I practice this as well. Keep the television turned off. TV can act as a constant background. You don't want to use the TV as a constant background, or you have that voices coming from the TV in the background, and it's actually a distracting, especially if you're a sports fan and something comes on related to sports. They traded your favorite player or something. You're in the middle of a serious conversation. You're gonna be looking over like, oh no, they didn't. What? So you want to make sure you try to keep the TV off during communicating times. All right, let's move around. Move along here. Make eye contact when you are talking. You make eye contact. That shows that you're actually listening to a person when you make eye contact with the person. Sometimes, for some people, it seems to be hard to have eye contact, but when you're communicating with your spouse, that it shouldn't be a hard thing. So make sure you have eye contact. And when you have eye contacts, that it shows that you're actually listening to it. It sends a clear message of that you are listening. Facial expressions. My wife always get on me about that. Facial expressions. If you say something, you hear something that agree with. Don't make faces. What? You know that what face and that. No, that ain't me. You don't want to make those faces or making faces that you just totally tuning her out, or you want to keep away from. Watch your facial expressions, your gestures. Make sure you're not, if you're listening, make sure you nod your head, okay, or say, okay, I understand. That's part of communication. And the major part of communication is, or communicating, is listening. And we have as human beings, we want to be heard, in our conversation. Somebody say something, oh, no, not, no, That's why when you're in court, they make sure that you communicate, because you get your turn, and if you speak out of turn, they tell you you're out of order. So when you're communicating, you don't want to be out of order. Okay, don't, this is a, oh man, this is a really good one. Do not look at your phone while interacting with your spouse. It seems like every time you want to communicate or you have something you want to discuss with your spouse, someone always call or someone always text you during that time. And you hear your phone go beep, doo. It is just a big distraction and a big interruption and you're trying to discuss something serious with your wife or your husband, your phone or start vibrating, so it's a good idea to try to turn it off, or at least don't look at it, because you easily get distracted with it, especially people that work from home. They tend to use their phone a lot as for communication, emails and stuff. You constantly get emails and things like that. So make sure that we are not looking at your phone and when you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse. Avoid surface level or single word responses. I'm real bad at that. Yeah, okay. You did this. Oh, yeah, okay, all right. In other words, let's move on. Sometimes some things or some subjects are worth being discussed, so you have to take the time to actually discuss it instead of trying to move on. Let's move on, real quick. And then sometimes when you give quick answers like that, it sounds like you're snapping, and sometimes you actually are snapping, especially if it's something you don't want to hear about. Oh, you left your socks out. No, they. Instead of, if there's a reason why you did it, give the reason. Give the reason when it's your turn to speak. Don't try to come up. No, why they talking? No, 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 I didn't. You know, because then you don't get her riled up, and you both get riled up, and then the communication is out the window. Designate a central location for all important reminders, dates, and messages. This is so you won't forget things. You know, there's been many times that, especially as husbands, we don't remember stuff. Like kids' birthdays, we might remember the birthday, we don't remember the year, we don't remember, sometimes we don't remember anniversaries, you know, because women, they'll remember the time and the day that you met them, and they expect you to remember all that. What you can do is, like I do, is just put it in your phone. Like special dates, you know, like her information, you might want to have it in your phone, the kids' information, and so when it comes up, you'll already have it. Okay, include a designate central location for all important reminders and dates, and make sure you're not forgetting those dates. So make sure, like for instance, again, if you have like an anniversary coming up, you don't want to forget about it. Put it in your phone. You know, send you a reminder a day before, not the day of. Please, not the day of, because you have to run out. You might end up going to Walmart or something to get some cheesy flowers instead of actually getting some nice flowers. So allow yourself time enough to respond to those dates that you set, those special important dates that are set aside. So make sure you put those in your phone like a day or two, even sometimes a week or two, as a reminder. You got this date coming up, your anniversary coming up, your wife's birthday coming up, the kids' birthdays coming up, the time that you met is coming up, and you have that in you know, that way you can send flowers, you can say, oh, I'm taking you out, what for? Or the time that we met, you know, you sound like you just really into it. You make yourself look good. Include your spouse as a friend in your social media list. If you're married to someone, they should not be not have access to your social media page where, you know, these different folks pop up on that. Who's that? You know, ain't your friend? You know, how come I'm not your? You know, that's a whole different argument. And what you trying to hide? You know, make sure your wife is on your social media page, and sometimes you can communicate with your social media page, and you can put it out there. Hey, I'm taking my wife out on this day because our anniversary. So, and if she has access to your page, she'll see that on there and make you look really good. So there's ways to communicate, and there's ways not to communicate. When you're communicating, the best part, I've always said that the major part of communication is listening. And if you're listening to someone, you can't cross them while they're talking. You know, you can never cross them while they're talking. If you're listening to them, you know, you listen to their full responses to your answer. And when you ask a question, make sure you are listening to what they have to say, and make sure we uh, supporting each other by, you know, making sure that what you're listening to, you're actually listening to it, and give them your undivided attention, and not just saying okay, whatever. You know, that's a bad that's a bad word to be using to try to communicate with your wife. Whatever. You know, you don't ever use that word. Those are some words you shouldn't say. One is whatever, and another one is okay. You know, with attitude. You know, and then your gestures. Please watch your gestures. No, no. You know, like wait, let me get a chance. Let me talk now. You know, you don't want to be doing that, because then you are not communicating with each other. Then you start, because once you start, once you get in the mode where the discussion gets heated or you get into argument, communication is out the window. You can't communicate while you're arguing. You can't listen when you're arguing. When you're arguing, you want to out talk the other person. And we all, as humans, I mentioned before, we like to be heard. And if you feel like you're not being heard, you naturally get on the defense and say, you ain't listening to me. Every time I try to talk to you, you don't listen. You go off in another world, You just be looking all upside the wall, looking crazy. That's a whole nother argument there. You just put fire, coal on the fire. So make sure that we are communicating, and when you're communicating, it's the same thing in ministry. For those of you that are in ministry, communication is the key for having a successful ministry as well as a successful marriage. Because if you're not communicating with your members in your church or your flock, they're not going to get what you're talking about. And we like sometimes these ministers like to talk over people. You can't talk over people. You have to talk at their level, or talk at the same level. And the same thing communicating with your spouse. You don't want to sound like you're talking down to them, you're belittling them. You don't want to sound like you're doing that. Make sure that you're communicating right. We all have to practice this. I'm not a perfect communicator, but once I find out my faults or my faults are brought to my attention, I try to make a conscious effort to not go there again. And sometimes you might go there again, but that's all a part of being human. Again, no one is perfect, and no one communicated, and no one is a perfect communicator. But we work toward being perfect communicators. The same thing is with being a Christian. No one is a perfect Christian, but you work toward being a perfect Christian, and that's all that anyone can ask of you. Is being a perfect, or being work toward being a perfect communicator. Because you never get there. Trust me, you never get there as a perfect communicator. Because sometimes you have to. First of all, you have to think before you communicate, and especially when it's your turn to say something. Uh, After you've listened, you have to think about your response. You got to think about your facial expressions while you're being communicated to. Because if you have that look on your face, like you a lie, you know, you you know, you a lie look on your face, you already messed up. or that tone in your voice where you didn't say yours, now it's my turn. Let me say something, and when you're a communicator, make sure you allow the other person to communicate back. Don't just keep going and going and going and going. And when it's their turn to say something, then you start up again. And furthermore, and I tell you, you don't want to do that. Make sure you're communicating with each other. The same thing I always say. That's why the Bible compares the kingdom as as a marriage. Christ loved it. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. That's why that's compared to that, because it's the same general principles that you practice in that. As a minister, you have to learn to communicate. You have to learn to read your people, and that's the same thing in a marriage. You have to learn to read your wife's expressions, read her demeanor for that day. If she's feeling down, you don't want to bring up nothing that's going to make her feel even worse. If she's having a bad day at work, you want to communicate something encouraging. And you know what, we kind of look down on encouragement. Everyone needs encouragement now and then. And everyone is going to have those days where they're feeling down or they're feeling overwhelmed. And when someone is feeling overwhelmed, that is not the time to communicate something negative to them. You want to communicate something positive. And when you communicate something positive, you are listening. When someone wants to vent, you just listen to it. They might not be mad at you, or when they're walking around, it seems like they have an attitude. It's not you. Sometimes they just need to vent. Allow them time to vent. And when you allow them time to vent, that means that you're listening to it. And then watch your response after they vent. Always say something encouraging. Tell them, okay, I understand. You can do this. You can do this, And there's been a lot of days my wife had to tell me that when I was out working, because, as African American men or black men, it seemed like we have the hardest time on jobs, things that, people always look for you to be the way up here. And even though they're at the same level, and things like that. And sometimes it can be very stressful. And I was one of the ones that didn't like bringing my work home. But I found out that, if you want to vent or communicate to your spouse, as my wife has always been a pretty decent listener, and she listened to me, and I tried to make sure I'm always listening to her. But again, no one is perfect, so we have to practice being good listeners. That's the key. Practice being good listeners, because you want to make sure that your kids pick that up too, because kids can, they're another one that'll just go on and on and on and on and on, with each other as siblings. Make sure that they learn to listen to each other when they're trying to communicate, and then it'll spill off, and when they go to school, they'll be able to listen to their teacher. They'll know how to communicate with their teacher, give responsive answers to their teacher. So you want to make sure that you're communicating with them as well. So communication is a very important part of being marriage or a successful marriage, and make sure that we are constantly listening to each other. Sometimes it's kind of hard, especially when it's something you don't want to hear, or is it something about yourself you don't want to hear. You just can't wait till your turn comes so you can say something. And when someone is communicating, and we've all been guilty of this, if someone is communicating something with you, and you've listened to them, for instance, if your wife is communicating with you, honey, I want to mention to you that it's a little hard on me when you leave your dishes out, your coffee cups out. If you could just put them, rinse them out, or wash them out, or put them in the dishwasher, that would be a big load off of me. If you can put your dirty clothes in a hamper, and then you come back and say, well, the last time I looked, and every time you come in, you leave your coat. You can't hang up your coat, and you're going to tell me about leaving my clothes, not putting them in the hamper. It's just messed up the communication there. Your response should have been, oh, okay, I'll watch it the next time. What if I just wash the cup out and put it back on the rack to dry? Would that help? Something like that. Not bringing up something. We're not talking about you or her leaving stuff out the hamper. We're talking about you leaving your cups out. You didn't went to a whole nother level. So make sure we are learning how to communicate with each other. Make sure we are listening when we go to the house of worship. And leaders, pastors, make sure we are communicating with our flock, as well as in the home, and it spill off with your children, with your family, when they go to school, when they go to work, and in life. This is Pastor Larry. I'm going to be signing off with Let's Talk Marriage. Now remember, all the music that you hear on here is from an app called Whoop Triggers Plus. So make sure you look that up if you have a church, you don't have a musician. Look up Whoop Triggers Plus, and you can add some music to your church. So that's the music we use on here, and it's fantastic. So this is Pastor Larry. I'm going to be signing off once again with Let's Talk Marriage.